This week we're at the Bruce Hotel in Stratford where we go foraging, eat some charcuterie, and cook with Chef Aaron. I feel like I'm the least qualified person to be doing a food show.
We should put you up to some kind of challenge. We should make you start developing a menu, and you should be the final episode of this season's shoot.
I think downtown Kitchener has had a bad rap for a long time.
The chefs in Kitchener-Waterloo have a little bit of like a inferiority complex with a big city.
That's the chef in you, that's the human in you.
This was so good.
It's beautiful.
This was an example of a perfect food.
Beautiful day.
Yeah, it is a beautiful day, sort of. Beautiful day to be outdoors foraging. It'll make us look hardcore.
Yeah.
Well, I have my camo hat on, my foraging hat.
I don't actually own boots or a foraging hat. I think that I found a piece for my menu.
Oh yeah? A piece?
A piece.
Like not a dish?
No, the serving ware.
You're inspired and engaged, I'm happy. That's probably the most important ingredient, right? So
Yeah. Well, it was a suggested purchase on Amazon for some reason, and it is a 32 centimeter T-Rex, which I think is like this. We can like put some meat on it or something. I feel like it's like a thing that it'll be memorable.
So you're envisioning maybe making a charcuterie board out of this, hanging it off that?
Where are we headed today?
The place we're going today is all encompassing. They have a forager on staff. It's so cool. The chef Aaron did a stage at Noma, and you can really see it in his plates, like the influence of. So at Noma, they're famous for using what surrounds them, right, and bringing the most out of local ingredients. So that's an interesting thing to think about, because here in Canada we have like a varied amount of things at our disposal. We have different things all around us, from like things with tropical type flavors like pawpaw or May apples, and then things like wild horseradish or cedar tips, or all kinds of different things to flavor food, right? To avoid using like, you know, leaning on stuff like, say, chipotle, and we use chipotle a lot at Taco Farm, but what native thing could we find to emulate that flavor? So they do a lot of that here, which is super cool. So I'm excited to experience it.
We're off to a place Phil calls The Orchard, which is his garden and also close to a lot of good foraging. I've never been foraging before. I buy all of my food from the grocery store. I do, however, appreciate that Phil and the Bruce Hotel go to such extremes to push the menu and really create something that is both unique and true to this area. It's the end of the fall and the garden is starting to look really sparse. It's incredible to see how many usable ingredients Phil is still finding. Now we're headed into the bush to see what we can find. To be honest, I'm a little bit nervous eating things we find out in the forest in Stratford. This is not a usual weekend activity.
Yeah.
Nick's on a hunt for something.
Yeah.
Can Taylor eat that?
No, not a good idea.
He's gonna have an anxiety attack right after eating it.
Hallucinogenic.
If you read a book and it says that it's not edible, that could be just because it's like tough as wood, or it's
full of sand, or
it's just disgusting, or it could be deadly toxic, or it could just make you wish you died. Interestingly enough, though, a good way to help identify mushrooms in the field is you just take a little nibble, like spit it out, and that can tell you a lot sometimes, depending on
like bitterness and
So with boletes, there's a lot that are like, they look like they'll almost look like a porcini, right?
Yeah.
But they're super bitter,
right?
And so you can quickly, before having to key out exactly which one it is, you taste it, it's bitter.
You wouldn't eat it anyways. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you're at the restaurant, then you're allotted a lot of time for experimentation. Like, you could chase a rabbit hole and then nothing come from it, and that's okay. Like, it's part of the process.
Yeah. And there's definite times where nothing good comes from it, but then there's the times where it's like, wow, this is the most amazing thing ever.
Right.
And so it's a give or take, and it's really worth it if if you can do that.
We're now headed to the larder at the Bruce Hotel to see what Phil does with all of these ingredients.
In general, we don't use things that don't grow here, right? So
Yeah.
the corn that we grew here, Cherokee White Eagle it's called. What's that one?
Nice.
It's
So
also
this is
another...
for a grain, like
Yeah.
for a dried grain.
Yeah.
Cool. I'll come back when there's tacos on the menu.
Yeah, I guess so.
They make all of their own charcuterie here, which is not something I ever imagined a restaurant in our area doing.
How much do you and Phil work together? Like, so other than his garnishes on this are obviously straight from his jars.
Yeah,
The spices and the things that he's foraging.
we have one in the salami chamber right now. I just called it a forest salami because it has like spruce tips and the spice bush berries and sweet fern and an East High sop and like basically anything I could find that came out of the forest and was dried.
Yeah.
I just blend it up and make spice mixes out of that. So
Right.
yeah.
And you're saying that as far as black pepper goes, that because it's not in Ontario, that you have to basically find new ingredients. How challenging is that, or is it a fun challenge?
You're not going to replace black pepper, but you can find maybe other complementary spices and stuff that also work.
So this is a whole head of Celery AK. This is from Anthony John, soiled rep. So take this guy, take all the little nubs at the bottom and then take all the dirt that's in there out. And it's really tedious, but then you kind of get that like supernatural
So
shape.
not peeled at all.
Not peeled at all, no.
Taylor's been challenged to, at the end of this season, he's going to cook a menu for some guests at Taco Farm. It won't be a taco menu, but his
It'll
experience...
be supervised by somebody that knows
Yes,
it's going
I will be
poison.
supervising. His experience is 1 year at Outback Steakhouse.
8 years at Outback Steakhouse.
8 years at Outback.
Yeah.
Once the best blooming onion maker in all
Fastest,
of Canada.
not best. That's
What's cheese fried? What's that
It's the
mean?
most, so it's the highest calorie count appetizer in the world or North America?
North America for sure.
It's got to be the world if it's North America.
A bloomin' onion, they pile some cheese fries on it, and then covered in bacon and cheese and melt that whole thing.
We're going.
That's gross.
No.
Okay, we'll go.
This guy here, this is just our pot barley. And I guess I hate to say just our pot barley, but it's from Organic Manor, so it's obviously organic. And then we ferment it for 2 days to get a little bit of the flavor out of it, if you will. Like if you go like 4, 5, 6 days, it really starts to get gnarly.
Yeah.
So we just ferment this guy for a couple of days. Then we warm it up in the butter that the Celery AK was cooked in. So this is the butter that the whole head got cooked in.
Yeah.
Then it rests overnight, so the butter becomes Celery AK butter. So we put a little bit of the butter in here, and then we finish it off the heat with a little bit of apple vinegar. When you think like fine dining, you think like these things you wouldn't use.
Yeah.
But again, this is something I learned at Noma, was this is okay. Like this is the natural way that this plant became, so just let it be. Like this is a bit of the apple dye. This is a little bit of blue cheese from Glengarry. This is their Celtic blue cheese. I think it's one of the tastiest blue cheeses out there. That's just, one of those personal opinion ones. I hate the idea of wasting too much stuff. So if something kind of goes slightly askew on a plate, like if it looks totally like, oh, this looks like you just smashed stuff on a plate, well, yeah, you got to redo it. But if you can still make it work within what you've already started, well, then you're good to go.
Right, yeah. That's a beautiful plate.
Yeah, there you go, Scandinavia.
Awesome.
Every single element on this plate has such an incredible and local story.
Yeah, tell us more about, I think, your approach to the cuisine and like sort of establishing a culture to Canada. Like Canadian cuisine has been a funny thing to answer to for a long time, but clearly you're making a new headway, I think, in that answer.
When you hear someone across seas, when I was in Denmark, and they say, where are you from? You say Canada, and they say, oh, and then maple syrup. Or, oh, back bacon.
Yeah.
And that's it. And for me, it's, I think, kind of important that if someone was to ask an Italian what Italian food is, you could go on for hours and hours and hours. But if you ask a Canadian, there's not a lot of like sense of pride that, oh, it's like we can list a few things and that kind of stops.
Yeah.
And food culture takes hundreds of years to build. So if we start now, then we have something for down the road.
Yeah.
That the country as a whole can say, oh, this is Canadian cuisine.
Yeah. One thing my answer to Canadian food, and it's very different than yours, is the sort of collection of cultures and how you can be in Sudbury and eat pierogies, and you can be in Cambridge and have amazing Portuguese food, and there's all these different cultures throughout and different sort of blends of them, and as marriages happen and cultures continue to merge, there's neat blends of it. But you guys here at the Bruce are trying really hard to not necessarily borrow from other cultures. Like, even though we can transplant vegetables and grow them here that we used to grow in the old country, you guys are trying to stick to vegetables that are native and flavors that are native to here.
We started on this path, a couple years ago, and there's never a day that it's easy. When a supplier tells you they're growing the coolest Japanese turnips,
you want it.
But we can't do that.
Right.
There's so much that does grow here, and there's so much that grows comfortably. But as a culture, we look for things different. We look for, oh, that's very exotic, and it comes from the other side of the planet. Well, if that creates a carbon footprint that's, that deep, why would we look at that? Why wouldn't we look at something that grows 2 kilometers away?
Right.
They are really playing the long game here, both for Canada and the sustainability of the world.
When we first started on the whole concept of, let's take away the 3 things, the 3 crutches. So that's olive oil, black pepper, and lemon juice. Classically, you're taught that those are like the 3 things that sit right beside you in service. Yeah. And all 3 of those things go into a lot of what you produce. So all of a sudden, we took those away. And it wasn't like the next day everyone understood how to do it, because this is 2.5 years later, and we're still trying to figure out how we use things within a landscape or that grows comfortably around here that makes sense, that works similar to that.
Yeah.
I guess to be creative within a box, I feel like is also kind of interesting as well.
It shows you something you'd never thought you could have done with something.
Yeah, the boundaries are good and they make us more creative. And that's when creativity really comes out, right? And Phil, what a great example in that larder in the basement and all the different ferments and things he's working on. And I can only imagine the joy when he brings that to you, and he's super excited because he's brought you a substitute for vanilla or pepper or whatever it's going to be, and you would never have bothered trying that if you were continuing just to use the ingredients that are at hand and easy.
After a few hours in this building, Nick and I were starting to feel really overwhelmed with the complexity of everything going on. Aaron headed back to the kitchen, and Gilad joined us at the table for one last talk before making beignets and heading home.
Really interesting as somebody, I go to a lot of restaurants, but I'm not in a lot of kitchens, and I feel like if I was from the dining perspective, like I could have a pretty good understanding of what you guys do, but being here today has been like just amazingly eye-opening.
No, and that's the thing with me, I'm a pretty good cook. I got some history. I know, I've been to school, I know some things. And the food on these menus, I can't imagine what it tastes like. I have to eat it, which is such a cool experience, right? You can go to a million restaurants and you can read the menu and you can go, yeah, I know what that's going to taste like, and I'm going to like it, and I'm going to order it. And here it's like your trust is in the team, and it's honestly like eating that dish with the celery AK and the gel and the different components was like a new experience that I've never had before. There's nothing like this around here, and the way that you guys are treating ingredients that other people step on as they walk by is it's awesome. Like, it's all new. So
we talk a lot about this new Canadiana. Like I'll talk about woodruff, which grows everywhere. Yeah. But we've never thought of incorporating it until Phil came back with like a bush, and we're smelling it. It was like this, like banana, like vanilla. Like it's very desserty. Where a recipe would call for vanilla, we now use woodruff, whether or not it's an extract we made or a sugar that we've steeped in. So these little things, like on the pastry, but they exist everywhere in the kitchen.
What do you love the most about working here?
The scale of time and freedom of creativity. I can explore things on a long-term scale and play around with projects that can take a while to mature and to ferment.
Yeah, it's obvious that it goes through the cuisine. Like, you can taste the happiness. So.
All right, that about wraps it up. Nick and I are so happy that we came here. It's amazing that one, this restaurant exists, and two, that it is so close to home. If you're looking for something that's really special, make your way out to the Bruce Hotel in Stratford. You will not be disappointed. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next week.